Perhaps the masters of today's Ukraine, who are far over the ocean, want to take the authorities that are in place right now in Ukraine and make it hold the burden of all the unpopular decisions.
That was the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, speaking at a press conference in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, Tuesday. He was responding to a question from a reporter asking about the current status of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, whose term of office ended earlier this month and who has suspended elections. Putin suggested that Zelensky was being held in place in an uncertain legal context so that he could take the blame for a number of likely to be unpopular decisions that must be made militarily in the fight with Russia. We bring you his comments in full on that question here.
The Ukrainian government, its governance is based on the idea of not a presidential republic, but rather on an idea of a parliamentary presidential republic. And so the main levers of power are concentrated in the representative body, which is the parliament. So it's quite logical then that the constitution is built that way, and so that all of the other legal acts that are passed based on that idea. So, strictly speaking, based on our very preliminary assessment of that, the only legitimate power in Ukraine is the parliament and the speaker of the parliament. But in general, if they wanted to hold presidential elections, then they need to change the wartime law, and that's all, and then they can hold elections. But they didn't want to do that. They decided not to. But what I personally think, and this has nothing to do with the constitution, perhaps the masters of today's Ukraine, who are far over the ocean, they want to take the authorities that are in place right now in Ukraine and make it hold the burden of all the unpopular decisions, and in fact hold the burden of the next decision to reduce the age of conscription. It could be reduced to 23 or in fact to 18 years of age. And these and other unpopular decisions could be the burden that this government is going to carry. And then they're going to be replaced with other people who will not have any of that responsibility for past unpopular decisions. These people will just be replaced. Now, this, I believe, is the idea. Then it all sounds very logical if it's true. Let's see what happens going forward. But like I said in Minsk, this situation must be formulated ultimately, and the response must be given. The answer must be given by the political and the legal system in Ukraine. This is what will make the final say, and I don't think it's that complicated. Now, the 2016 wartime law says that presidential election cannot be held during wartime, but it says nowhere that presidential authorities are being extended. So it says so in Article 111 that the authorities go to the Speaker of the Parliament. Now, as for the strikes on Russian territory, I don't know about that. When current General Secretary of NATO was Prime Minister of Norway, we dealt with a lot of important issues in the Barents Sea. We discussed it with him, and back then, when I spoke to him back then, he seemed a reasonable person, not suffering any dementia. And if he speaks about attacking Russian territory with these weapons. As a person who heads an important organization, a political organization, he is a civilian himself, and he must know that high-precision weapons, these kinds of weapons cannot be used without satellite imaging first, without reconnaissance, and now then choosing the target and choosing the way it's used can only be done by highly trained professionals based on reconnaissance. So take Storm Shadow missiles. These flight missions, as they're called, can be decided automatically without the participation of Ukrainian officers. And it is done by the missions are designed by those who provide the weapons, so it can be done without any participation of the Ukrainian side itself, the Ukrainian army itself. Now, other missiles, other systems such as ATACMS, are also used based on satellite reconnaissance. The mission is created, then it is calculated, and in fact, when it's being input into the missile, the person who is inputting it may even not know what the missile is going to do, but the mission that's being input is actually being prepared by NATO officials, by NATO military, not by Ukrainians. And so the NATO countries, especially in Europe, especially in smaller countries of Europe, they must realize what kind of game they're playing. Smaller countries with small territories and that have a lot of population, they must understand what they are, and they must take that factor into account before they speak about attacking Russian territory. Now, these are all serious matters, and we are addressing them. We are looking at them very patiently. We see what's happening around Kharkov. It's the Ukrainians that provoked us. I spoke about that publicly. I said that if they're going to attack our civilian areas, we're going to create this security zone. And so we started to do that. First, they provoked us in the Donbas. They lied to us for 8 years, saying that they're going to address this issue in a peaceful manner, and then they forced us to try and resolve the situation in a military way. Then they lied to us when they would try to negotiate. Then they decided to decide the matter on the battlefield. Now, we told them never to attack Russian territory or residential areas around it, or we're going to have to create this barrier zone. But look at what the foreign media is saying, Western media is saying. They never say that our areas like Belgorod and others are being attacked. They never say about this. And this is Ukraine's doing. So when we respond to that, it is because of Ukrainian action. And so the same response could happen if we see these high-precision weapons and missiles being used against Russian territory. And so once this affects the situation in Ukraine, look at how it's difficult to say how this will affect the global situation or the situation in Europe. Does the West want a global conflict? I don't think so. Perhaps we could agree on some strategic weapons, but we don't see any willingness to do that as well. There are talks about that, but we don't see a lot of eagerness when it comes to that. We'll see going forward what happens next.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.